Mission of a quid pro quo connecting aid to Ukraine to investigating Democrats. The cleanup continued over here at the White House and up on Capitol Hill as Republicans echoed the president's muted response to the Mulvaney mess. But Mr. Trump caused more confusion earlier in the day of his own on his green light to Turkey's invasion of Syria.
Station, this is President Donald Trump. Do you hear me?
After speaking with astronauts on the space station, President Trump tried his best to defy the gravity of the moment. Mr. President, do you want to clarify what Mick Mulvaney said yesterday? Was the aid to Ukraine
I think he clarified it.
Investigating the Democrats?
And I do have to say this. We yesterday had a tremendous day in Texas.
Pressed on Acting Chief of Staff Mick Mulvaney's admission of a Democratic dirt-for-dollars scheme with Ukraine the president dodged. No surprise, as a source close to the White House said, the president was not happy with Mulvaney's briefing room confession of a quid pro quo.
I have news for everybody. Get over it. There's going to be political influence in foreign policy. I'm talking to Mr. Carl. That is going to happen.
Mulvaney later clarified in a statement there was no quid pro quo. And while some top Republicans on Capitol Hill appear to be reading from the president's talking points,
I think you saw Mick Mulvaney clarify his statement.
A growing number of GOP lawmakers are finding Mulvaney's comments troubling.
Well, yeah, whatever might have been gray and unclear before is certainly quite clear right now that the actions were related to getting some of the Ukraine to do some of these things.
Still, the rarely seen White House press secretary Stephanie Grisham gave Mulvaney a pat on the back.
He did a great job. He mentioned the same message over and over and over. And now the media, of course, is, we put a statement out clarifying some of the things that the media got themselves in a tizzy over.
The reaction from Democrats, not so fast. House Speaker Nancy Pelosi called Mulvaney's remarks a confession.
What's the reaction to the Mulvaney walk back last night? Was that enough to satisfy your concerns?
I didn't find it the least bit credible.
The president is trying to spin his way out of trouble, latching onto a Washington Post report that career diplomat George Kent told lawmakers he raised concerns in 2015 about former Vice President Joe Biden's son Hunter's business dealings in Ukraine.
He excoriated the Obama administration and Joe Biden's son, saying that he has tremendous problems with Joe Biden's son and the Ukraine.
The Biden campaign released a statement saying on Joe Biden's watch, the U.S. made eradicating corruption a centerpiece of our policies toward Ukraine, including achieving the removal of an inept prosecutor who shielded wrongdoers from accountability. In response to fighting in Syria that appeared to signal Turkey's violation of a day-old ceasefire, the president insisted he was on top of the situation. Mr. Trump then made the bizarre claim that the U.S. is somehow in control of oil assets in the region, something that's just not true.
We have ISIS under control. We've taken control of the oil in the Middle East, the oil that we're talking about, the oil that everybody was worried about. The U.S. has control of that, and there are no shots being fired. And a lot of people are doing a lot of things.
At his rally in Dallas, the president minimized the conflict between Turkey and Kurdish U.S. allies as a schoolyard fight.
Sometimes you have to let them fight. It's like two kids in a lot. You got to let them fight, and then you pull them apart.
Now, as for the president's policy in Syria, Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell has just posted a scathing op-ed in the Washington Post. In it, McConnell does not directly criticize the president by name, but we can put this up on screen. It is pretty strongly worded. The Senate Majority Leader says, quote, withdrawing U.S. forces from Syria is a grave strategic mistake. It will leave the American people and homeland less safe, embolden our enemies, and weaken important alliances. One other development to mention this evening, Wolf, the president has announced his new energy secretary to replace Rick Perry, who is stepping down from that post after being swept up in the Ukraine investigation. Deputy Secretary over at the Energy Department, Dan Brouillette, has been nominated by the president for that job. Wolf.
All right, Jim Acosta at the White House, thank you. Let's go to Capitol Hill right now, where House Democrats have just learned that Energy Secretary Rick Perry is defying their subpoena for Ukraine documents. Let's go to our congressional correspondent, Sullivan Serfati. Sullivan, on what grounds did Perry say he won't comply?
Well, we largely will see the Energy Department here making the exact same argument that the White House has in resisting their own subpoena request, questioning and arguing about the validity of the impeachment inquiry, given that the House has not formally voted yet to start a formal impeachment inquiry. Now, in a letter just sent in the last 30 minutes to the congressional committees, the Energy Department goes on to say, quote, even if the inquiry was validly authorized, much of of the information sought in the subpoena appears to consist of confidential executive branch communications that are potentially protected by executive privilege. And Rick Perry himself, he was out defending himself today, saying that he didn't see a problem with President Trump asking him to work with Rudy Giuliani on issues related to Ukraine. But he says that the Biden's name did not come up in his conversation with Trump, aides, or the Ukrainians. But he does admit, Wolf, that the issue of corruption writ large did.
Sondland, Democrats have packed next week with more witnesses. Tell us about that.
That's right. Despite the White House opposition, the Democrats in the House have been successful in getting many key witnesses in. And next week, setting up to be potentially a huge week. Just look at the schedule ahead. At least 7 witnesses at the moment are on the schedule from the State Department, OMB, NSC, and the Defense Department. But perhaps the biggest moment of the week could come early on Tuesday, when Bill Taylor, the top diplomat in Ukraine, will be up here behind closed doors. Now, he, of course, was one of the few people that we know, according to those text messages released from the committee that were handed over by Kurt Volker, that really expressed some outward concern about the quid pro quo. Here's one of those text messages where he calls it crazy and asks the U.S. ambassador to the EU, Gordon Sondland, quote, "Are we now saying security assistance in White House meetings are conditioned on the investigation?" Certainly, Democrats very eager to hear from Bill Taylor. Wolf.
Yes, they are. All right, Sondland, thank you. Let's get some more on all of this. Joining us now, Democratic Senator Mazie Hirono of Hawaii, a member of the Judiciary and Armed Services Committees. Senator, thanks so much for joining us. And let's get to this sharp rebuke of President Trump. The Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell, is now writing a new article in the Washington Post suggesting that withdrawing U.S. troops from Syria is, quote, a grave mistake. The president wants to withdraw U.S. troops from Syria. So how significant is this rebuke of the president by Mitch McConnell?
This is one time when I agree with Mitch McConnell, but of course, as a majority leader, he can and should do more than write op-eds, because we have a House-passed bill that would rebuke the president, sense of Congress, and then there are other bills that would impose some sanctions on Turkey. So those are the kinds of measures that Mitch McConnell has within his power to bring to the floor of the Senate, and so he has to do more than this op-ed.
I don't know if you heard, but McConnell says he wants stronger legislation than what was actually passed in the House of Representatives. You agree with him?
Well, great. Bring all of this legislation to the floor, Mitch. Thank you. I'd love to debate and get on with it, because there's no question that the president enabled Turkey to do what Erdogan wanted to do. And the so-called ceasefire is a total capitulation to what Erdogan wanted, which is to get the Kurds out of northern Syria. So this is a total capitulation, and we need to bring all of this to the fore, because we have a president who's out of control.
You were briefed by the Defense Secretary, Mark Esper, yesterday, you and your colleagues on the Armed Services Committee. Did you get any clarity on the president's decision-making process in all of this?
No.
So
no.
What did you learn? What did you learn,
well,
if anything?
Since I can't talk about the substance, but what it is that the conclusion I and others have drawn is that that Erdogan would not have risked attacking northern Syria if American troops were still there. He would not have risked killing, even by accident, American troops. And the president removed that risk by withdrawing our troops, and so you get what we have now, which is chaos. And for the president to describe this as this situation as a sandlot fight just goes to show how infantile his thinking is.
Let's get to some other issues, sensitive issues. Yesterday, as you know, the acting White House Chief of Staff, Mick Mulvaney, acknowledged that military aid to Ukraine was in fact withheld in part because of President Trump's interest in seeing Ukraine investigate the 2016 election, and Democrats at the same time. Mulvaney tried to walk that back. But how concerning is this admission to you?
It is an admission. So great. You know, this administration is very flagrant in its abuse of power and its corruption. And I suppose Mulvaney thought, sure, let's just put it out there that there was a quid pro quo. And obviously this didn't go over very well, so now they're trying to walk it back. But we all know what we heard. And for the White House people to start once again blaming the press for getting things wrong, please, you know, what are we supposed to do? Not believe our lying eyes? Give me a break.
What, if anything, can you do? Because you heard just a little while ago the Energy Secretary, Rick Perry, who's leaving. He's not going to comply with House subpoenas. Other White House officials are not complying with House subpoenas. What are you going to do about that? What do you think can be done about that?
The House is going to be able to, they're going to continue to proceed with their impeachment inquiry, which is a constitutional process. And so this is all part and parcel of what could be considered another aspect to the articles of impeachment. But what's happening, Wolf, is that you have two processes going on. I mean, you have all of the policy and political decisions that are creating chaos for our country, and there's that going on with the Muslim ban, the immigration, the trade wars, the latest going on with Turkey. And then you have, on the other hand, the constitutional inquiry, impeachment inquiry, and I think people should keep it straight. And on the political side, we have a chance to rebuke this president by going to the polls and saying we can't have 4 years more of this kind of chaotic decision making that exposes our country to pretty much, I would say, the ridicule of the world.